must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR, Truth Frequency Radio.
Everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed, and I have as co-host with me this evening, Kathy Dunson. Kathy, are you there, sister?
I am. Hi, everybody.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to join us. And also, I have as special guest, Mark Sargent, the host of Strange World, also a radio show host here on Truth Frequency Radio. I believe he comes to everybody Tuesday evenings. And actually, Mark will tell you the particulars on it. And if you would, Mark, also give out your website information, talk a little bit about the release of your new book and where people can go to find the Flat Earth Clues on YouTube and support you in your endeavors.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you very much for having me on the show tonight. The website, the free website is enclosedworld.com. The subscription website is marksargent.com. The book, which came out just recently, is called Flat Earth Clues, The Sky's the Limit, available on Amazon and Audibles as an audiobook. And I am on Truth Frequency Radio Tuesday nights, currently at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern for a couple hours. So that's about the long. Oh, yeah. And of course, the YouTube channel, Mark K. Sargent, or just honestly, you don't want to skip all that stuff I just rattled off to you. Just go into any search engine, type in Flat Earth Clues, and eventually you'll find me.
Excellent. Well, want to first thank you for your contribution to this area of research and for standing with truth and, declaring yourself as being basically a watchman on the wall in with regard to sharing this as revelation. And you've done a lot of homework and a lot of investigation on a whole lot of different topics, which all came out and where you incorporated all of those in your Flat Earth Clues series for a lot of those, especially myself. And I know others initially in the early days of the investigation when there was not as much material as there is now available on these particular topics like the dome and the enclosed world system and the flat circle of the earth, all of these things that your Flat Earth Clues was definitely one of those things that stood out amongst all of the other information that was out there. And so if you would, can you talk a little bit about what they are for those that have not heard of them or,
Sure.
Haven't looked into them?
Sure. I'd be happy to do it. When and a little quick backstory on it, everybody, I did not wake up one morning and think that Flat Earth was the greatest idea ever, since sliced bread. In fact, there's a t-shirt that I can't wait till it comes out, which is, I became a Flat Earther because I tried to debunk Flat Earth. That's how everybody starts down this road, which is, nobody thinks it's a great idea at first. Everyone, the 5 stages of acceptance, the first one is always denial. And I was in there, so starting in the summer of 2014, I worked on it for 9 months and tried to debunk Flat Earth. I basically tried to prove the globe. And that changed in February of last year, where I started, it just came to me, like a bolt out of the blue. I can even tell you, it was 3:30 in the morning on February 10th. I woke up and I had the narrative in my head and, in my own voice, which was really weird. It's not like I was hearing voices. It was my own voice. Got to the shower and had the whole thing. And I just sat down and started typing, that Jerry Maguire moment. And basically what I started to build was, for lack of a better term, was the dummy's guide to Flat Earth. Because there were a few people out there that were making some of this stuff. There was Cesar from, I think he was Germany. Eric Dubé was out there. Matt Boylan was out there. There was a few people that were doing it, but I honestly thought that the message was a little staticky. So when I got to it, all I really did, I'm not going to take that much credit for the whole Flat Earth movement, which is, look, I walked up to the radio and I turned it, a quarter to the right, and then all of a sudden the station came in much clearer. And a lot of people were resonating with it. But what I did was I built a series of clues called the Flat Earth Clues. And I really built them as these small sections because I hadn't really uploaded any YouTube videos. And as you know, when you're brand new to YouTube, your first videos can only be less than 15 minutes long.
Right.
So I made a series of them. I made one every day, built it from scratch, did the narration, put the slideshow together, did all the video stuff, and then throw it up on YouTube. And I really thought that right away I would get a whole bunch of, intellectuals, high level graduates with masters or PhDs that would come out and say, oh, no, you forgot something really, really obvious. Here's the math, or here's whatever it is. And then it would be shot down. And instead, by the time I got to the seventh or eighth clue, because right now there's 12, 13 if you count the one that's on the subscription site. Once I got those out there, people started contacting me right away. It really, really resonated with a lot of people. And then, immediately phone calls and interviews started happening, and producers, with different people started to ask me things. And then finally, and we'll get into this more later, the subject matter experts came forward. And but the clues, the long and the short of it is, it's a series of videos, short videos, which compiled together, I think they tack about now 2 hours and change, which basically say, look, I think the world is not the sphere that you've been told since you've been 6 years old. I think it's actually an enclosed system, old school firmament type, dome type, enclosed structure. Prove me wrong. That's basically what it is. And I there's a summary, an introduction, and then, the clues that follow, covering everything from cinema to explorers to physical properties of the world we live in. And, they're connecting the dots. And yeah, there's some leap of faith, leaps of faith made. But, by the time you get to the end, what I try to do is I try to turn it into a court case, which is, if we're going into court, the burden of proof, and I know science is like, saying, no, the burden of proof is on flat. It's like, no, it's on you, because you've had 500 years to try to pull this sucker off. And all I'm trying to do is create reasonable doubt in the globe. And I think I do a really good job of that, to where, now,
Absolutely.
The topic has just gone bananas. There's been, we'll talk about the weird things that have happened in the last 18 months, but I never, you would have come to me 2 years ago and said, yeah, by the way, this is what you're going to be doing and this is where it's going to go. I would have laughed you out of the room. And now it's like nothing surprises me anymore. I wake up and people, I'm just waiting for some weird new, news headline to come out, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I can see that. So.
Yeah, very cool. Well, since you brought this up, as far as, the burden of proof and this debate being sort of like a courtroom case, and I'm sure that you get condemned for a lot of different things, but it's the same with all of us that have since come to this revelation and opened ourselves to it as possibility, and embracing what we've come to know. We challenge others with why it is that they believe a certain way. But one of the things just recently, a lot of people have been condemning me for studying other extra biblical material and extra canonical texts and all this information, which in this last book that I put together, it shows that it's all speaking about the same thing. And so you can learn about the firmament or the circle of the earth from all of this material. And yet many people will label it Gnostic or try to call it some other derogatory term, and then judge it and expect people to not be even willing to investigate it. And, like if I was in a courtroom and I had to testify as to whether I believed in something, specifically if it were, if my life or my freedom or my livelihood or it was dependent on whether I had actually studied or looked into that information, I would most certainly examine the evidence in every possible way before judging or laying condemnation on it or saying that it's irrelevant or worthless. And I most certainly, wouldn't post my health and well-being and all the aspects of my freedom upon it without having to investigate it. And so, because a lot of people that do condemn, they haven't even looked into the material, even a whole day. They haven't done any real research or having looked at in open-minded manner, unjudging, unbiased manner, looked at all the evidence. And when you do, it's my opinion that it becomes clear, definitely clear that, well, most certainly you can't deny that the Earth doesn't move. I mean, the science says it doesn't. But Kathy, feel free to jump in also at any time. So, but if you would, Mark, talk about why it is you laid out the clues in certain aspect, what it was, how you decided to outline them, because the progression, I think, is very relevant in the way you present the material and get people to consider what it is you're talking about, and it piques the interest so that it makes them want to go and look at it instead of just saying it's completely lunatic fringe or ludicrous or meaningless.
Yeah. And by the way, to your comments just then, because I've been thinking about this pretty much nonstop. It's hard to believe it's been 18 months, but at the same time, look how much has been accomplished. Which is when you're saying that the people that condemn it generally don't look at it, and you got to remember that is really the only immunity to this thing, which is you have to. And I am firmly convinced of this now, that you really have to treat it like a Pandora's box,
right?
Literally like a Pandora's box, which means if you look at the box, if you look in the box, I should say, you're done. You're going to have to resolve this one way or the other, because then it's in your head. But you can get away with not looking at the box and just making fun of the box from the outside of it.
Right.
And that's what every debunker tries to do. It's like, well, no, I'm not going to look at the box. The box is stupid. You're stupid for even looking at it. I'm not even going to entertain the thought of looking at the box. That's the only immunity. Because if you, and I've even told friends, good friends of mine who I know live, full, very stable lives. I've said, look, you seem like you got a good thing going. If if you're bored, or if you want a new direction in your life, and take a look inside the box. But if I do not want to be, don't shoot the messenger in this case.
Right.
I'm warning the ahead of time. In fact, I can give you a quick analogy on this before I go into the chapters, which is kind of like if anyone knows the old private detective stories. Most people don't realize that private detectives will turn down quite a few jilted wife cases where the wife comes in and says, look, I want you to find out if my husband's sleeping around on me, because invariably the wife, because they never get repeat business, the wife will hate the detective for delivering the message.
Right.
And so they'll just say, look, you don't want to know this. If you're coming to me, chances are he is cheating. So, I don't even want, I'd rather not, have somebody hate me for something like this.
Right.
Anyway, so when it came to the chapters, honestly, when I laid them out, I had no forethought to it. When I said I had my Jerry Maguire moment, I woke up and I had the introduction, and there was no layout of any. Every day I woke up and I did the same. It took me literally a day to build a video from scratch. I wrote the narrative. I wrote the text, did the narrative, grabbed the images, put that thing together. And by the time I was done and uploaded to YouTube, it was like 6:00 in the evening, put it up, and then hope that I didn't screw anything up, and sometimes I had to re-upload videos, and it's like, because I had the title wrong or there was a typo somewhere. But when it came to, but the progression did seem to work out.
Yes.
Which was, I started with, a quick intro like you're supposed to do. It's like, 15, I think it was 12 to 14 minutes, the introduction, which is like, okay, this is what I'm thinking of covering. Get ready for it. And, it hits you with a lot of different things, a lot of, the intro hits you, with a little bit of Antarctica, a little bit of the space program, a little bit of movies. And then, Rob Skiba gave me grief because not directly, of course, but he said that the first clue, which was the empty theater, he said, it was my weakest clue. And I go, no, I disagree, because it's the teaser clue. It's the one that lets you go in, and it's one of those, things that make you go, moments. Right. Which is, okay, the first clue is that there are no movies about the moon mission, right. Ever been made. The greatest history, accomplishment in the history of mankind. There's never, and I am very comfortable saying that because I'm a media junkie. I have absorbed a lot of media over these. I make movie references all the time, and I'm the first one to say it's like, look, media in its broad scope has jumped the shark. If anyone knows what that means, that's a media
I
reference.
use that all the time.
Yeah, most people, you got to be
Especially
old.
about space articles.
Exactly, and I know, Kathy, you're probably too young to even enjoy the jump the shark moment because you're what, 29, something like that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So, but that's, anyone wants to know if they're listening. It's like, look up Happy Days Fonzie jumping the shark tank, which basically says that media has run out of there's nothing new under the sun, which is why I actually dedicated a thing on my subscription site to a rant called 1999, the greatest year in movies. And I still to this day, I challenge people. I go, and I know I'm right. Where I say, look at the movies that came out in 1999, just the breadth of movies that came out, and tell me that I'm wrong. But anyway, so the first,
I think, let me add here real quick. I think that was a perfect place for you to start, actually. And I've known Rob a long time, way before all of this, but I think that was perfect because of your background. I know, listening to your show, your radio show, I've gotten so many tips on movies that I had not yet seen. One was Peter Sellers' The Gift. I think it was called The Gift, and maybe Patricia mentioned that one with the elephant in the party.
the elephant in the party. Yeah.
The elephant in the party. It says, does it say, on the front of it says flat, the earth is flat, and it's the elephant in the room. I mean, that was really great to catch that. And the 13th Floor, I think, was one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Dark City, you were just mentioning in 1999. Yeah. I've gotten so many lines on good movies to watch. So
I really do. I am finicky when it comes to movies that I will recommend to people, and even to where I mentioned the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, which was an interesting. I know M. Night Shyamalan, he went downhill after his winning an Academy Award on his very first movie, but it shows you, it kind of goes into the Truman Show concept of, we believe the world that is presented to us, and children especially will believe. I mean, they're empty vessels, right? They will believe anything you tell them. And so if you build a town out in the middle of nowhere and make it look like the 1800s, and you have a child that grows up in that town, they will believe that they're living in the 1800s. So I throw that at people. I go, look, if you grow up and there's several generations, I should say, 25 generations of people, and you tell them it's a globe, why would they believe anything different? I use a quote. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. George Orwell, the guy that wrote 1984, he did an article, a science article in the 1940s on how science convinces us of things, and we take things for granted because science is always right. It's the Neil deGrasse Tyson line, which is science is right whether you believe in it or not, which I think is incredibly arrogant, but we'll go with that for a second. Where he said, George Orwell said this, he goes, it's interesting. You could go to the average person on the street and you could ask them, how do you know the world is a globe? And their first response is always the same, which is, well, duh, we know it's a globe. Why would you even ask something like that? And if you press them on it, they'll get angry. It's like, why are you even bothering me with this? We know it's a globe. But the thing was, that article was written in 1946. There was no NASA until 1958. So, and no pictures of any consequence, in 1946. So how do you know it's a globe? It's because science told you it was a globe. And that's, I find that fascinating, again, which is why when we circle back to the movies angle, the empty theater, which is Hollywood and the world media at large, most of it, not deliberate, because they're not all in on it, have made a series of movies over the years that reinforces the globe. And without us knowing it, we love, I love Star Trek and Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and there's every other space science fiction. Well, I don't love them as much now, but every one of those has a subtext, which is you're enjoying a space movie while you're living on a globe. Space is whatever you think it is, but you're still watching it from Earth, which is inside a small solar system. And it's fascinating that, again, when I get to the empty theater, the reason why I call it the empty theater, obviously, is because there's no substance to it. There's never been, through all these science fiction movies, and there's been a ton of them, there's never been a single movie made, documentary or not, made a major motion picture made about the moon missions. The closest they ever got was The Right Stuff in 1983. And Apollo 13 in 1995, I believe, without looking at the book. And it's amazing. It never, ever came up. Not even a straight to DVD movie, not even a project, if Hollywood, not a project that like made it to a certain point and then died. It just never was made. And I'm old enough to remember seeing The Right Stuff in the theater in 1983. And I remember it was 3 hours plus long, and I get to the end of it, and the last scene is a high Earth orbit mission, and where they don't even show any of the space stuff. It's just a rocket going into high Earth orbit. I'm going, what the heck happened? And where's the sequel to this? Why was it? There's your movie. If you want a movie that's absolutely set up for a sequel, it's that one. Never ever happened. And I thought it was fascinating. So, yeah, the first one was kind of a teaser. Now, people come back and say, well, it doesn't prove the Earth is flat. I go, no, it doesn't. But it sure gets you thinking about why there's certain things that haven't been done. And, it kind of starts leading you down the path gently, but it does lead you down the path. And then I smack them, and do you want me to go into the second one, or do you want to talk about it?
Yes, but let me make a comment here really quick. I think you were smart to open with introduction and connection to NASA as well, because that is the agency that everybody turns to for affirmation that we live on a globe and that the Earth is a sphere, because of the 4 pictures that they've shown us in the last 3 or 4 decades, that this is the Earth as a sphere. But another thing is that the movies, Hollywood has such appeal to the masses, and so many people, even if they aren't familiar with NASA, they're most certainly familiar with these different movies, and having grown up on all the sci-fi over the years, they can parallel what you're talking about in that manner. And so I think that you are, again, piquing their interest and setting them up for those things that you're going into, which with the next part, you're going to talk about, the fact that we don't have even right now a 24-hour or several hundreds of them 24-hour live web stream of the Earth and all of its glory from space, when we supposedly have these 20,000 satellites up there, in my opinion, is fishy. And it's definitely, if this technology, as they say, it exists, and all of these supposed accomplishments that they're able to do, why not? Why do we not have, these angles, these perspectives to affirm these things? And because we don't, the lack of physical evidence and all of these things, in my mind, is, shows there's a red herring that something's not exactly right.
Oh, absolutely. Everything you said there was dead on, which was, and that was part of my frustration when I was trying to prove the globe, which was the best analogy I can give here is that imagine if the globe evidence was these huge pile of boxes. And it's like, well, it's obvious, we all know these huge pile of boxes. This is where all the evidence is, the globe. And you start opening them one by one, and you start going, it's just empty wrapping paper. There's nothing in them. And one by one, I started realizing that, wait, all this hefty evidence was never there in the first place. So what exactly was I looking at? And, just take where should we start with that? The fact that there was no photos of the Earth from space, a full-blown disk shot in full sunlight from 1972. There was one in 1972, supposedly taken by Apollo 17, and they didn't produce another one until the summer of last year, which that's 43 years. And that's such a huge amount of time in the technology world. You're telling me, what are you talking about? That can't be possible, right? But it was true, and we know it's true. We absolutely know it's 100% true. No debunker can come up against this. They just say, well, it doesn't prove anything. It's like, what are you talking about? It's just because you have no answer for it. We know it's true because the White House was the one that announced it. Neil deGrasse Tyson tweeted it, and the guy that wrote you're going to love this if you didn't already catch this, that wrote the press briefing for the White House was Scott Kelly. He's like, really? You're up there in space and you're the guy that's right. Why are you writing a press briefing for the White House? Anybody could have written it down on the ground. But I try to call it the angry wife syndrome, because, and again, this is one of the only conspiracies I ever know of where you see these huge moves being made by the organizations in reaction to the things that are coming up on the internet that social media is talking about. So when we say, oh yeah, there's no pictures of the Earth from space, and by that I got to clarify for people, because I ran into this some years ago. And by the way, we come up on a break here in just a minute.
Right. We got a minute and a half.
Okay, real quick. I was at a software company back in 2000, and I tried to make like an iconic thing for everybody in the tech support department. So I was going to put a picture of the globe on everybody's monitor. And I go in, and I know the internet wasn't super great in 2000, but it was not bad. You know, you could do Boolean searches. And I searched for something called, Earth from space, the globe from space. And I kept getting just rows and rows and rows and rows of not different versions of the Earth, the same exact Apollo 17 photo. There were no other photos of the Earth from space. It was right in front of my face 15, 16 years ago. And I immediately, when I looked, and it was just in different resolutions, slightly different hues, but it was absolutely the same photograph. And I was looking at this, I was going, this is ridiculous. I go, NASA, you suck. How can you be so bad at this? It's like, I need a freaking picture of the Earth from space. And there was nothing to choose from. And so I just gave up, and I decided I was going to pick something else. And that was the kind of the end, but just goes to show you, I couldn't see the forest for the trees, which was right in front of my face. But we're so conditioned that the leap of faith wasn't there. I wasn't going to say, oh well, there's no photos, because obviously they're trying to hide the actual shape of the Earth.
Right. Right. All right. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody, for second hour. Two things that I want to bring up really quick before I get you to comment, Mark, and that has to do with the Orion trial by fire, that video production by NASA, where he talks about how they're not able to, even in this day and age, to go beyond the Van Allen radiation belts, and that they would have to do this twice, and that the radiation, because it's so bad, it would affect the onboard computer systems and also the astronauts themselves. And so they talk about how they need to remedy this situation before they're able to, follow up on these manned missions to Mars. But also something funny happened on the way to the moon, where Byrd releases that video where you have the astronauts, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, in the lunar module, faking the shape of the Earth by using the lunar module window to show it as spherical. And for them to do that and utilize that in order to hoax it, in my mind, if it was spherical, why would they need to do that in the first place? And if it was round and globular, why would they need to hoax it and deceive the public at large? Yeah. And those two incidents, and I'll address them separately. The first one, which I'm fond of mentioning, which is for people that are just want something that really should make you scratch your head when it comes to NASA, which is the Orion trial by fire video, which is on the NASA website right now. I mean, you can go there. It's on nasa.gov. Just look up Orion trial by fire on any search engine. You will find it. And it was released in October of 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And it's got, I think it's Kelly Smith is his name, young guy. And he's out there and he's going into, this was made for television. This is like an 8-minute segment. You could introduce on Nova or, any of Neil deGrasse Tyson shows where they talk about, they're very specific about the Van Allen radiation belts. And if anyone doesn't know what the Orion project is, it's the Mars mission. So when I say Orion, just immediately think the Mars mission. But they can't send anybody through the Van Allen belt until they solve the radiation problem. And the first time I saw that, I was just incensed. I was like, "What are you kidding? You solved this problem back in the 60s." In fact, I brought this up to when the guy claimed he was a scientist during a debate a few months ago, and because I love throwing at people, I say, "Okay." This is kind of a side note. I said, "Look, what happens? Tell me how we got through the Van Allen radiation belts during Apollo."
the Apollo mission, because we sent supposedly 8, 9 supposedly didn't ever leave orbit, and then 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? That's a lot of, that's round trips right through the Van Allen belt. What shielding did you use in the capsule to go through it? Because you have to use either, it's got to be a common metal, it's either going to be lead or gold. And they're both really, really heavy, as most people don't know that gold is twice as heavy as lead, because nobody has that much gold. But like a gold bar, super, super heavy. And no one could answer that question. In fact, Van Allen himself, which is an interesting thing if you want to read up on it, he was the one that announced the belt in 1959 and said, "Oh yeah, super dangerous. Can't go through it. People will die if you try to go through it." And yet he had to revise that statement several years later when Kennedy was all hot and heavy about sending people to the moon, because then you have to go through it. But they didn't. So they made that statement and they didn't realize, they didn't know enough about radiation to figure out, it's like, well, you guys just basically said that we have to encase this sucker in lead to get through it, but you can't encase the top of a rocket in lead. It throws off everything. It's you're putting an anchor on the top of a rocket. That's not. There's no way that's going to work. And people say, no, we fire bullets out all the time. I go, yeah, that's different though. Bullets is not the same as a rocket. So no one can answer that question. But Van Allen's statement was, well, we can get through it if we fly really, really fast. And it's like, really? That's your answer? That's the entire answer? It's like, gun it, just step on the gas, and that's how you're going to save the astronauts from dying, is fly. And even now, I think our best speed, supposedly, if you believe anything NASA says, is under 20,000 miles an hour. And if the bands extend out to 60,000 miles, that's 3 hours each way that you're going through these things. And it's like, fine, even if I believed you, and you said, okay, fine, you floor it and you get through, you leave the Earth's orbit and you get to the moon. What exactly are you doing when you're coming back? Because that's a really small nozzle when you're coming back, and you're slowing down on top of it because you got to get home, and you get a break for Earth's gravity. I mean, you're spending a lot more time on the Van Allen belts. No astronauts died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody got any weird forms of cancer. And I have to say weird forms now because there was a story that came out, not even a month ago, saying why they released this, 50 years after the fact. Well, I know full well. But they said, oh yeah, the astronauts in Apollo got more heart disease because of cosmic radiation. And they did a study on 7 of them supposedly, and it's like, really, why now? Why are you bringing this up now? It's because the radiation question cannot be answered. They don't know. That's one of the big reasons why any scientist, we're having a hard time getting any scientist to come up against us, because there's too many questions that you cannot answer. Fine. You want to throw something at 2 or 3 of our avenues, which is why the clues work so well. You won't be able to. You can try to shoot down some of them. You're not going to get all of them. And if you can't get all of them, then all your other answers come into question. So it's like, fine, you want to talk about the curvature of the Earth all day long, trigonometry and geometry and sticks and shadows. You want to focus on that for 15 minutes? Fine. Then I'm going to bring up NASA, and you are going to have a real hard time with that. I'm going to bring up Van Allen, the radiation belts. I'm going to bring up Antarctica. I'm going to just keep hitting you to where you will not have enough, which is why the guy that I debated that Van Allen question, he quit after the first break. I've still got the recordings on my side. He could not take it. He was and he thought he would go in just casually. He was doing it from a hotel bar.
Yeah, the guy at the party.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yeah, he was. Yeah, with his friends in the background, and I just kept hitting him until finally he off air. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm out of here," and that was it. He bailed. And then the other guy they brought in, and Richard Hoagland. Fine. The first guy bailed. I think is Mark D'Antonio, if I'm not mistaken. His name was Mark. But Richard Hoagland was the guy that was supposed to go up against me, and he didn't even show up. He didn't call in. He just bailed.
That is funny.
Yeah, and so they had to get some guy, and the guy they got, the scientist they got who ran a debunking website at the end, who seemed pretty level-headed. The only reason they got him is because he was desperate to take the gig. He had just gotten out of prison 2 months ago for fraud, embezzlement.
Oh my gosh!
He stole a ton of money from eBay and pled guilty and did time.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to believe him.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, look, this guy runs a debunking website and he's trying to, expose fraud, and he went to prison for fraud. What credibility? And I asked the station guys this because, people were sending me, things. They're going, look, why are you talking to this guy? And I asked the station guys, and they said, look, we had no choice. Hoagland didn't make it. You made the other guy quit. So we had to get somebody or the show ends. I was like, oh, you guys are killing me. But that's where we're kind of at right now, where we have a hard, if you listen to the show, Kathy, you probably remember, the Jeffrey Grubb challenge that I'm throwing out there.
Oh, he's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeffrey Grubb, huge brain, PhD, he's got degrees in multiple sciences, and he's, totally on board with this, although his shape is a little different than what we've got going. But it doesn't really matter. He said, look, whoever you get to debate, I want first crack at him. And I can't get anyone to debate. I can't do it. It's almost impossible to get. In fact, we ran into somebody on. I can't remember the show the other night. Jaron found him where there was a show that was going to have some little radio show podcast thing versus a flat earther, and his name was George, right? And I'm going, I don't know any Georges in flat Earth, not in any of the the higher levels. And he was just a new recruit who had just gotten so pumped up and contacted a radio station and said, yeah, I'm totally want to be a champion for flat Earth. And that shows you the confidence. I kind of joked with the Morgile, when he went up on the John B. Wells show. But that shows you when people get so excited, it's like, somebody on the bench going, put me in, coach,
Right.
I don't care how big they are. I'll take them down. It's like, and he was just swinging on that show. Luckily, Jaron got in and he got to bat cleanup, and finally they kicked Jaron off because they couldn't answer all his stuff and they were getting frustrated. But it was a fascinating debate watching this happen. I honestly had never known who George was, and apparently he had only been in flat Earth for like weeks, and he decided he was confident enough that he wanted to do a debate. Anyway, sorry, where were we?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Just real quick, one thing I wanted to mention was listening to your radio show. Yeah. I learn a lot. I mean, either people send in stuff that is new, and I find that they're putting more stuff out there, and we also uncover things that totally destroy their game. There was a video out today from Feed Your Mind channel that had video clip. I sent it to both of you. That had a video clip of them saying, we don't give you any images of the sun, showing
right.
The sun is actually false.
I was going to ask you. I've got that on my screen right now as you're mentioning that.
Well, in some months, maybe it's almost a year ago now. I don't know where I came across it, but Forbes magazine published an article and then also 4K video that NASA put out about the sun and how they create the image of the sun. And having been one who followed suspicious observers, Ben, every day, starting my morning with my coffee and watching Ben, I thought, this is the sun. We're looking at the sun somehow from the SDO, and it's totally false, not true. So, these little tidbits are out there, and then they're pushing more things out. And this is what I learned from you that was really an important thing for me to catch on to. And Zen even put this in his latest book. Is the invisible plasma shield, which protects Earth from radiation, discovered 7,200 miles above planet from MIT study. And, these things are, I don't know if I believe the 7,200, but they put this stuff out there all the time now. And I catch a lot of that from listening to your show. So I recommend your show for that.
Thank you. And I learn stuff, because I just basically skim the emails when I do email shows. And I learn stuff every single week. It has kind of gone along with the thing I put at the end of every video, which is, do your own research and ask questions. And I'll be darned if that's not exactly what so many people have been doing. And, the internet misses nothing. If it's out there, they will find it. They will find, the most obscure movie references and the most obscure science things, and there's no limit, as long as it's out there, they'll go back, decades, as far back as they can to find the info. And it's been really, really interesting to see what everybody comes up with. What you mentioned. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of the Popular Mechanics, the August 1931 issue with August Picard and his description of looking out, the hole and seeing the Earth as a flat disk with upturned edge. I mean, do you care to comment on that?
You're absolutely right, and well, heck, go back even further than that. The Orlando Ferguson map, from the 1800s, which was the flattened stationary Earth map, which is the first map I really looked at. Bought the poster and the whole 9 yards, and this is not a new concept by any stretch. There's lots of people out there over the years that have kind of figured this out, but unfortunately they didn't have the communication tools that we have now. That's what really makes it different, is now we've got people that are comparing notes that didn't have that ability. Years and years ago. So, like, for example, the Orlando Ferguson map, which I can't even, again, because the internet misses nothing. Like I used to say, if you know which one I'm talking about, the brownish one, and it kind of looks like a roulette table where the North Pole is kind of humped in the center. But I can't even say roulette table anymore because somebody calls up and says, again, the internet misses nothing. They say, oh yeah, by the way, you shouldn't mention roulette table. I go, why not? And they go, because if you add up all the numbers of a roulette table, they add up to 666, which is absolutely true.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
It's like, are you kidding me? So I have to, and I think I mentioned that to Marty Leeds, who's really big into gematria, numerology. But so now I say it's like an old hubcap, but how many people have old hubcaps anymore? That kind of dates me. But
here's one for you on the numbers. It was a story I sent out in my email this morning. Scientists spot galaxy made of 99.9% dark matter. And then they go on to say Dragonfly 44 is located 300 million light years away in the constellation Coma. So that's what NASA, they do it all the time. It's like 33 million or, their numbers are in there.
So let me kind of give you a quick rundown because I know I've been jumping around a little bit, and thank you very much for that. About what NASA shows you and what they don't show you. So what I mentioned was that no pictures of the Earth from space from 1972 until last summer, 2015. And by the way, I love bringing that up because they say, well, what's the relevance of that? I go, the relevance is because now you release release a second picture 43 years later. I call it the angry wife syndrome, which is, okay, a husband comes home after 40 years of marriage and his wife says, oh yeah, I'm leaving you. And he goes, why? Well, because you only brought me one bouquet of flowers in 40 years. And so what happens? The very next day, he comes home with another bouquet of flowers. And he goes, oh, here, now we don't have to get a divorce anymore. And she goes, what are you kidding? She goes, the only reason you even brought me that bouquet is because I mentioned it to you. Right. And that's kind of where we are. It's like that sort of length. It's like that's almost 2 generations of people, that 43 years. Yeah, fine. You released a second picture. Great. And then we said, oh yeah, by the way, there's no pictures of the Earth rotating on its axis from space. And what happens? 2 weeks later, the exact same thing. Oh yeah, here was a satellite that apparently was exactly 1 million miles. Don't think that's an accident. It's like a nice, comfortable number, 1 million. We all get that. 1 million miles. And here's the moon transiting in front of the Earth. Where was this thing 20 years ago? Right. Where was this thing 15 years ago? And it's horrible. It's so low resolution that they only showed like 21 frames that first release, and it was like super no frame rate at all. And then we say, yeah, but the clouds aren't moving. So what happens very next month? I could not write this if I wanted to. The very next month, it's like, oh yeah, here's a Japanese satellite showing the clouds moving on the Earth. I'm going, yeah, but the Earth isn't rotating. So what's the problem here? Why can you show the Earth rotating without the weather moving, or you can show the weather moving but not the Earth rotating? Why can't you give us both? Why is it, a supercomputer can't simulate this about now? You don't have the budget for it? Right. And then on top of that, the things that I mentioned in the clues, like there is no astronaut footage of any astronaut with a camera, exterior, not interior, exterior shot where the camera does a 180, where he just turns around or further, like a 360. There is no footage of this. No astronaut has ever held a movie camera, and turned around. Don't give me a picture here and a picture here and a picture there. Give me the video and show it turned around. Never happened on the moon. Never happened at Skylab. Never happened on the ISS. Even now, they won't do it. I'm still waiting for that'll happen one day, but you can't, because if you pan around, you're gonna show some of the stage stuff that they can't, which is probably the underwater ISS simulator, right, which they have,
or
the green screen. There is no video of, and I'll rattle off 2 more. There is no video. This one I think is very interesting, of any object from any space agency leaving orbit or returning to orbit. from Earth. And by that I mean, you'd think. In fact, I watched one from the '90s just recently, where there was a camera on the side of a rocket. Right, it's going up, and it's reached like 45, 50 miles, and then what happens? Apparently, the camera was on the second stage booster, and then it falls away. It's like, why didn't you put it on the capsule? Right. Why not put it on the thing that's actually leaving orbit? Why would you put it on the second stage booster? Because they can't. You could. There's no money shot. There's no. You can only take it so far, and then they can't. People thinking, oh well, that doesn't prove anything. Oh yeah, look up the JAXA program, the JAXA probes that supposedly HD cameras with a ton of built-in memory that wasn't even 10 years ago, where it supposedly circled the moon and then came back. And not only did they not take any pictures of the American landing base at the Sea of Tranquility, but they get back to the point where they're heading back towards Earth. It's like, okay, fine, here's your great shot of the Earth as you come back in HD, and they show it rising at the curvature of the moon, and then that's it.
That's it.
There is no more. And you're going, where's the rest of the footage? Why aren't you showing? Why are you showing nothing? And throw one more in at you, and that was even so far. Somebody pointed this out recently, where there's not even any movie of an astronaut inside. Because cameras are cheap, GoPros are cheap. NASA's got the money. Where you put it on the side of their helmet, they're in the airlock, they open the airlock, and they go out. And this kind of goes along with the 180 or 360. They don't even show the guy leaving the freaking airlock with the GoPro camera. It's like they're going, and you're saying, well, all these things that you mentioned, it doesn't prove flat Earth. I go, no, those things I do not mention, do not prove flat Earth. But what they do is they seem to show that whoever's running these programs is taking great lengths, going way out of their way to not show us what the Earth looks like. Right. It's statistically impossible to not show us some of these things. So if it's statistically impossible, then why aren't you showing it to us? And some people will say, well, it's because of aliens or giant space bases or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, I don't care what it is. If you could actually take a picture of the full-blown Earth, you would have done it by now. You would have done it decades ago, and you haven't done it. So,
which again brings suspicions. I mean, depending on what you do or what you don't do, it's the same kind of thing. So, but since you brought up the 666 with the roulette wheel, the whole thing with the inclination of the Earth, the 23.4 degrees minus that from 90 degrees, and you get
66.6. Yeah,
right, and then the speed, the rate, the speed, 18.5 miles per second, and then you break all that down. It's like 1,037.5416666 and a bunch of numbers.
They will put in numerology into anything that they can nowadays. I mean, numbers is a clever way of reminding people. It's kind of it's hidden in plain sight. Little things like Apollo 13. The only Apollo mission that had these weird problems and all this drama around. It's like, why 13? It's like it's a coincidence. No, it's not. It was never a coincidence.
Right.
So.
One other one, the rate of the speed, mile per hour, as far as the supposed axial rate, speed of the Earth, being 66,600 miles per hour. I mean, all of these 666 numbers in my mind is affirmation as to what and who we are really dealing with. As far as all these satanic connections, but yeah, and so let's go into some of the other aspects of the clues.
Sure.
Yeah, like with the flights and the all the other aspects that you laid out and built upon.
Sure. Well, let's do this. Let's since we're kind of doing them in order. Let's look at it because I don't consider any of them necessarily weak, with the exception of depth perception, because I've gotten probably more grief on that one because people just have a hard time getting their head around it. But the second one was the Byrd wall, where I go into it, and that was a complete accident when I got into the Byrd wall, because I was just doing my research on it when I was making it, after I was making the first video, and I realized that Admiral Byrd, that was most known for the hollow Earth theory, he had he did most of his work down in the Antarctic. And, anyone that's a conspiracy guy knows the hollow Earth theory. And Admiral Byrd, 1926, went to the North Pole and supposedly flew inside it and turned into one of those journey to the center of the Earth type things, which was all well and good. But you would have thought after that he would have stayed up in the North Pole and kept doing his thing for years and years. But he didn't. As a matter of fact, it was the exact opposite, where he goes down to the South Pole starting in 1928. And he just, that's where he lived the rest of his life. He just kept hammering Antarctica because he flew his own planes from 1928 all the way till 1956, better part of 30 years, looking for something. You don't spend that much time. He was already a freaking admiral. So what is he looking for, down there? He was a decorated naval officer. He was an explorer. He could literally write his own ticket anywhere he wanted, but he spent most of it on the ice and snow of Antarctica. And it was interesting. And again, that footage, and I'm sure you've watched it by now, the 1954 from Longines chronoscope footage, which we were so lucky to get. It was just out there on YouTube. It was just a fluke that, and not that many views on it considering what it was, where he goes on a kind of like a 60 minutes show of its day, where he goes on there and he says, oh yeah, we're down there, we're doing things. And it looks like we're just going to make a ton of money down there. There's there's coal, there's minerals, there's uranium, there's oil, there's everything you could ever want. And all these countries that are down there are probably going to end up fighting over them. He seemed somewhat concerned about the Russians. And he was talking, they talked about the last mission which he did, which was Operation Deep Freeze in 1955 and 1956, which was to come. It had not come when the show aired. And then that's when things changed. So, he made it very public that the place was going to be made, a ton of money. And there's people, people are going to be down there forever and doing things. So, a lot of people. He said it was very, very important. And then he goes down for Operation Deep Freeze, and that's when, in my opinion, I know there's different books out there called When the World Changed or Why the World Changed, but that's really when the world changed, was 1956, when whatever happened during Operation Deep Freeze, he had found whatever it was. And that's Murphy's Law for you as well, because I think he had given up. I think everybody that was involved, the people that held on to the ancient maps and everybody who was backing him monetarily, I think that's when they were, we're coming up on break. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
Are we still good? Okay. So where everyone was going to make money. And then I think he found the soft barrier, the hard barrier, whatever it was. And then everybody left the ice at the same time. They drew up papers, drew up the Antarctic Treaty, and locked that sucker down tight to where no corporation, I don't care how much money you make, no matter what country you're from, no corporation anywhere in the world can do work in Antarctica, period, forever.
Yeah, and see, that's all very suspicious as well. And then also, with him being a young admiral and then all of a sudden dying just, really right after that. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. Back, everybody, for second hour. I am your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed. I have as co-host with me Kathy Dunson and special guest Mark Sargent. Mark, I wanted to ask you about the Tarzinski, the UFO researcher that he talked about in looking at the covert aspects of the Operation High Jump and Admiral Byrd's journey, the convoy, the massive American and other Australian, British. There were many nations involved with it, but he talked about how some of Admiral Byrd's seaplanes were disintegrating, just being destroyed in mid-flight, and that they attributed it to perhaps being like a force field put up by the Nazis. And in looking at examining the firmament, it's my opinion that it seems to be the real answer for what they were running into. And so your comment on that?
Well, it's possible. I mean, I don't hate that idea. I don't.
Yeah. Because
there's been I've got a lot of questions on high jump, over the last 18 months. And when it comes to, you could go just about anywhere with this, but here's the one I kind of liked. Out of all the stories that I've read about Operation High Jump and what was going on, I kind of go with the fact of what's kind of happened and what nobody seemed to care about later, which was my favorite story about High Jump wasn't. I mean, yeah, the firmament. Yeah, of course it could be possible. And look, my day opens with flat Earth, so I'm not gonna shoot down any ideas. No play on words there, but. When it comes to this, the story I liked the best was that Yes, the Nazis were down there. They were, and you can look this up. This is a matter of fact that they were the only ones that were doing research down in Antarctica during World War II. Now, I thought that was very, very interesting for one, because that plays into the whole Indiana Jones thing. That the Nazis were really, really up. It's like, whatever it takes to win the war, let's do it. If it's, occult based, if it's alien based, if it's, if we find the Holy Grail, if that's it, no matter what it is, they're going to look for it. And so they were down there, and I think they entrenched themselves, and I think they did find something. Now, here's the story I really like, and again, it could be wild speculation, but it's a great story, which is that the Nazis actually, when they ran into a situation with high jump and they realized they were going to lose, they asked asylum from the civilization that was down there. Now, if you want to call them alien, or if you want to call them older version of us, or a more advanced technology, blah, blah, blah. But they asked them, it's like, look, can you help us out of here? They said, okay, look, we're not going to, you're not going to be allowed to take over the world. We're not going to help you take over the world. But if you want to leave this place, or, if you want to request asylum with us, you can request asylum, but you can't come back. It's kind of like the whole high school dance thing. You can't leave and come back. And
Hotel California.
There you go. Yeah, nice. You can never leave. But that was that was the situation. And here's why I kind of like that story. It's because Operation High Jump, who was run by Admiral Byrd in 1946, he was the guy that was running the show there. Whatever happened, because people ask me all the time, it's like, what about High Jump? What about the Nazis? I was going, here's the thing. No matter what happened during Operation High Jump, we're never going to know. That secret is buried. But no matter what happened down there, when it got to 8 years later, when Byrd was on national television, talking about Antarctica, he didn't seem to have a care in the world when it came to that place. So whatever happened, whatever problem they had to deal with there, whether it was a Nazi thing or it was a Nazi alien thing or it was a Nazi advanced civilization, blah, blah, whatever it was, they took care of it. Somebody took care of it because it wasn't even on his radar anymore. It was not even an issue. It's like, because he goes on television. If Antarctica is a big problem, they don't want people down there because there's an ancient civilization that's giving you a hard time, then you certainly don't want to go on national television and tell people that, oh, yeah, fire up the companies. Let's go down there and make some dough. No, he did the exact opposite. He went in and told everybody that it was a land of great opportunity, which meant not only did the Nazis, leave because of whatever reason down there, the other answer, of course, and the simplest of the explanations is the Nazis had a base down there and they destroyed it. And then they didn't, over the next 4 or 5 years, they realized the Nazis weren't coming back from it. So it was one of those two things. Either they took care of the Nazis permanently or the Nazis left and were not allowed to come back. Either way, they're good stories because, in fact, if you would go into the whole lack of movies, why didn't they ever make a movie about the Nazis having a base down in Antarctica? Never touched that one with a 10-foot pole. It's interesting, some of the plot lines, which are good, and Hollywood makes movies. There's a nickel to be made. Hollywood will make a movie on it, and they never made a movie about that storyline. In fact, go ahead.
I was going to ask you one other question with regard to what we're talking about with it. Have you read any of the prior? It seems that before Operation High Jump and the Admiral Byrd convoy down there, that the British had sent in a group of special forces, and there's a storyline connected to that and what they discovered, because it says that they, the whole, the story about their expedition down there, that they confronted and attacked the actual base, but it also is affirmed in this story that the Nazis had built upon already pre-existent structure, which seems to fall in line with what Phil Schneider had made mention of as far as these deep underground bases that they were building into and on top of other pre-existent structures. And so I was just wondering if you had heard about or know of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. I had heard a little bit about that, and it wouldn't surprise me. Why not? Nazis were extremely good at reverse engineering things, and given the amount of technology they already had, what device, what got them down to Antarctica in the first place? Was it part of, the technology that they reverse engineered back in the 30s that gave them the war machine that almost took over the world? I did a a video on this, some time ago, and never really got any traction. But that's kind of what got me started in certain aspects of my conspiracy thoughts where I am now. But you got to remember, when it came to the Germans, had a huge advantage when it came to World War II. Their planes were very, very good. Their tanks, their ships, they invented the assault rifle out of thin air. Everything they had was top of the line. We were jealous of everything that they had. And so it wouldn't surprise me. It's like, okay, if we got this far, imagine what we could do if we actually got to the source, or got even more stuff. And so, if they did find an existing structure down in Antarctica and decide to try to exploit it, yeah, why not? People still forget that at the end of the war, what was it, 1943 in Europe, or 1944 in Europe, they were flying jet planes. Right. Their early jet fighters were out there. No one had a concept of what a jet plane was, and these guys were flying them. I mean, the story of how they were still working like on time travel devices, in the last days of the war, which would still, potentially, turn it for them. So yeah, I don't think there was any stone they wouldn't, look under to find whatever it was, and if that meant going to Antarctica and taking over an old base, yeah, sure. I think it's a great story.
Yeah, it certainly adds an interesting angle to it, but the whole esoteric occultic side of the Nazi war machine as well, and the SS and their
the Vril Society,
and their fascination with all the stories, and it seems that also that with these esoteric occultic aspects, that they were in touch with somebody, that they were talking to somebody, that they were being led. As far as this high technology, and it reflects upon their inventions and everything. And as you said, they were very much further ahead as far as their.
They almost took it. Americans especially, because we're so bad at history, they don't realize. And again, I know I'm a little biased because I come from a German family. You don't realize how close they were to taking the whole thing. That they had this thing that they had pretty much had the war wrapped up. And I know people disagree with me and say, no, it's not. It's like, really? Because if Pearl Harbor doesn't happen, and I'm a big believer of that, of the Pearl Harbor conspiracy. If Pearl Harbor doesn't happen, if the American base isn't attacked and the Americans don't get involved in the war, that's it. Germany's, we're talking German right now.
Right.
That's the end of that thing. So what a coincidence that was. That the only way, because they took on the entire world simultaneously, and the only ones that weren't in it were the Americans. And but the only way the Americans were going to get it, people are really big on the greatest motivator of all is revenge. And it's and if anyone has any doubt on that, look in some of the rants I've done on other things. Every war we've done, sacrifice the Alamo, take the west coast of the United States, sacrifice the battleship Maine, win the
Lusitania.
The Lusitania, just keep going on and on and on. I mean, revenge is a huge, huge factor. But anyway, the point, I'm losing track here. The point is that Germany, no doubt in my mind, they were down in Antarctica. Now, to what extent, did they have a base and it was finally rooted out? The point was, by the time they got to 1954, it was over. Whatever was done down there was over, and it was, back to business as usual, which was still trying to find, the shape of the world. And by that time, the Nazi question was no longer an issue.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's follow up with that, with the Project Dominic and the Operation Fishbowl. They're launching all these. First they renegotiate these nuclear treaties, and then they start launching all of these huge in nuclear weapons up into the atmosphere. Yeah. What's the purpose? What are they doing? What are they trying to do?
Again, when the world changed in 1956, and I say that because whatever they found, and again, it fits so perfectly when I was looking. I love connecting dots like this, and it was not much of a reach at all. Which was, if you find the edge to it, if mankind, and I'm going to pin this on men, if you find a barrier that's out there, you all of a sudden realize you're in some sort of building. You want to call it a jail, that's fine, or the terrarium. You're going to try to test the limits of it. And that was immediately. Now, keep in mind that the Americans had already been working on their atomic weapons program since the 40s, and the Russians were playing catch up. But then all of a sudden in 1957, the Americans and the Soviet Union put nuclear, and I know by the way, I have to specify this. I'm still working on not saying nuclear because the Americans totally screwed that. Because Americans, the only ones that the slang term for nuclear is nuke. That's N-U-K-E. And if you extrapolate the long version of that, then it's N-U-K-U-L-A-R, which so many people use. And I've been caught using it, so I apologize in advance if I slip into it now. So the Americans and the Soviet Union put, and I also say atomic weapons, so I don't have to say it, where they put them on top of the rockets and they start firing rockets straight up from 1958 all the way until the end of 1962. And for me, there was only, it started out, like you mentioned, those were high megaton yields, those 3 or 4 shots. And megaton, that was an expensive proposition back in the 50s. Megaton was not a known word by anyone. And if anyone doesn't know what megaton means, it is way, way bigger. So if kiloton is thousands of tons, which is what we used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I do believe in atomic weapons, then megaton is millions of tons, which is a ridiculous number. It's almost inconceivable, the power of that explosive. And the first 3 or 4 shots that they fired straight up were in the megaton range, big ones. And apparently, if you can't defeat a barrier with megaton weapons, then what else? Why are you shooting for 4 years? Because you should be able to figure out the limits to the stress levels of the structure within a month or less. And what I was guessing at that point was they were trying to map out the sky. It's like, okay, fine, we can't bust through it, so let's just start firing rockets in every direction that we can and see if we can figure out the shape of this thing. And it served 2 purposes. One, they could see, sort of the reaction of what was going on when you fire. Granted, most of the ones later were in the high kiloton range. But you also get to figure out the shape because sooner or later, you're going to have to build a space program. And they built it really, really fast. And you need to know the shape of this thing so that your space program looks legit. Meaning you need to know how far you can set a rocket up before it's going to crash. So that, and if you know this and nobody else knows this, then you can send rocket missions to somewhere and say, oh yeah, it went here, went there. And since there's no crash rocket, no one's ever the wiser. And that's what I think they did for 4 years. They tried it, and the Russians tried it too. And look at the facts. The high altitude firing started in 58, right? And within the third shot, like after the third shot, really almost simultaneously, once the last megaton weapon was fired, NASA was formed. Right. Almost, I mean, it's like, why would you form NASA right after that? Well, because logic, look, yes, these people are very, very intelligent, but they're going to follow some of the same patterns that other people do. There's certain strategies, like in chess, there's only so many moves you can make. And that is, you have to control the sky. You have to control everything that goes up in the sky from a military standpoint. You cannot let the general public, you cannot let the subcontractors, you cannot let the private sector get up there. Because if they find out, you're going to have to start plugging holes, and that's going to get messy. Antarctica was easy. So by comparison, we'll do a quick summary, which is NASA is formed in 1958. In 1959, 2 things happened, which are so huge. 1959, the Van Allen belts, which we mentioned earlier, are announced by NASA. Van Allen worked for NASA. And he says, oh yeah, super deadly, something like a barrier is up there, but no one should ever, didn't say it was a hard barrier, said it was a radiation barrier, and no one should go through it. And the same year, they announced the Antarctic Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty was much quieter, but it said that no corporation can ever go out into Antarctica ever, and every country that becomes an economic power has to sign it. So if you create a new company or a new country called, Garcia Mania, right? And you become an economic power, they put a piece of paper in front of you saying, yeah, by the way, you got to sign this. Well, what is it? Well, none of your corporations go down to Antarctica. Well, how long does that last? They go forever. No one can ever go down there, ever. And you have to sign it and you have to do your thing. Those 2 things for me were a huge connect the dots. It's like, if it would have been one or the other, and if it would have been spread out over time, I would have maybe given you a pass. But if you say, oh yeah, by the way, because that's what you would want to do. If you're going to hide the world, you've got to do these 2 things. You have to protect the outer border, and you have to protect the upper border from the general population from getting there. And they did that simultaneously. and in grand fashion. One was a scientific discovery coupled with the militarization of the sky, and the other was a unbreakable treaty. Do you know of any treaty that's unbreakable? It's impossible. No treaty has ever lasted that long, and unilateral between all countries, and no countries can dispute. Not only can no country breach it, no country. You ever heard of any one country even breaking the rules? Like China going in, it's like, oh, we need more coal, and they just go to Antarctica and ignore everybody. Not only that, but if you're, I know you guys have probably heard me say this, but like, let's say I'm the president of Exxon, right? I've got unlimited financial resources.
Absolutely.
Who's to stop me from going to the New York Times, back in, the 60s, and saying, oh, yeah, I need you to run a story, a full-page story every week saying how great it would be for America to be in Antarctica. And I want this run every freaking week. Those stories are never run. There's no articles written on it. There's no nothing. It is a veritable media blackout, with the exception of every once in a while someone going down there and getting a picture taken with penguins. That's it.
Right. I agree. And the same thing with, suspicious behavior and why it elicits, for me, questions that makes me want to look into it more and investigate it. And with regard to the firmament and your website, the enclosed world, can you talk about it? Because in my opinion, there's other science which affirms it as a solid structure, not just biblical, because it definitely, the word speaks of the firmament as being a solid, firm, established, rigid structure. But things like radio waves and the way that, that they're able to bounce television or radio signals off of something out there, where they call it the atmosphere. But in my opinion, that's the firmament, and it shows that there is most certainly something solid out there, and that's why it's able to work in the way that it does.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. How convenient is that you can bounce radar signals and radio waves and take your pick off of what we know as the ionosphere, part of our atmosphere. Notice the word sphere in all of those cases,
right?
Where you're doing all those things, but at the same time, wouldn't it be coincidental that you could also do the same thing if the structure was solid? And once they figure it out, it doesn't take much. Throw a little blurb into a science magazine, and that's what you have. The science magazines will just parrot anything that the government tells them. So, and then they'll extrapolate from there, and they will build entire new subsections of science based off of that. And so now they've got massive explanations on how radio waves work over a curved surface. It's like, yeah, but it also could work on a flat surface, couldn't it? Exactly, if there was a solid, a solid structure. I'll throw in real quick the rainbows experiment.
Yes,
which is we can simulate rainbows inside a room. But not only do you need water, but you need a reflective surface. So if you need a reflective surface inside a room to simulate a rainbow, what's the reflective surface when you're outside? And why do rainbows have that certain curve to them? I know when you're looking from a plane, it's actually a circle, but that improves more of the point, which means it's a focused lens. If you look, if you're flying over a rainbow in like a helicopter or a plane, it actually is a big circle. And it's interesting the little aspects that were out there. But I'm sorry, back to your point. The firmament, which is Genesis 1:6, if I'm not mistaken, at least that's in the King James, which is a barrier separating the waters above and the waters below, which you say, oh, that's Old Testament, that's religion. I was going, yeah, but you got to remember when all these religions were written, they believed the earth was flat, that it was covered by a dome, that it was covered by a canopy or a tent, and it could be rolled up like a scroll and all those fun things. And you're thinking, well, science has never acknowledged that. I go, oh, is that true? Because the headstone of Werner von Braun, the Nazi scientist who became the head of NASA, you know where I'm going with this,
right?
His headstone is very modest considering who he is. Again, I still think the guy should have a giant statue with him holding a rocket in one hand and pointing to the sky in the other. But no, he points to the sky in another way, and that is, it's got the year of his birth, the year of his death, his name, and then Psalms 19:1. And look, I'm not that great on chapter and verse. I had to look that up. And it's like, really, and it says, and the firmament shows his handiwork. It's like, why would he be saying this from the grave? Why would he be talking about a barrier, about, all the verses you want to choose? That's the one you choose. He knew. He knew full well he had to. He was too tied into it.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how many other scientists know? And I don't think actually that many, believe it or not, because let me just go into a side note, which is, people say, oh, you talk about every scientist in the world has to know this. Every pilot has to know. It's like, no. This isn't like the Manhattan Project where hundreds of thousands of people knew you were refining uranium for a weapon. This is something that less is better. The fewer people that know about this, the better, because it's too big. It's not a secret that people can carry in their heads for that long without it starting to do funny things.
Mm-hmm. Let me get you to comment on why you think it is that they fly on the United Nations flag, being the seat of world government. They show the Earth with the azimuthal equidistant projection map as an emblem. Why do you think they're doing that?
To hide it in plain sight, for lack of a better term. I think they knew, again, the old maps, I think they figured, somebody had the old maps from a long, long time ago. And I joked about this in previous things I've done, where I've said, look, if you're the king of France in the 1400s and you have a map of the world, or, an old map, what are you going to do with it? That shows, the UN flag, basically, where the North Pole's in the center and all the continents are splayed out on the outside. Why, what are you going to do with it? Until you have the technology to exploit it, it means nothing. In fact, you can't even prove it. You may have a very, very old map. It's like, oh yeah, your best person says, oh yeah, it's 1,000 years old. But what do you have wooden ships and you have horses. You can't do anything with that until the internal combustion engine comes out. You don't have a way to test this. And then, of course, when you do, and that's exactly, again, that's the moves you make. There's only certain moves you can make once the internal combustion engine comes out. And I mean, we're talking rickety planes in 1928. You test the North Pole first because it's closer, figure out what's going on there, and then it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to keep flying. We're going to keep flying, and then again, the Murphy's Law looks like they almost gave up 30 years later, because how long are you going to look before it's like, even Indiana Jones would be like, I give up. But the UN flag, yeah, it people. I'll give you another thing about the UN flag, which is interesting. If you compare it to like a Mercator map or even a Gauss-Peter map, there's something really interesting about it. And by that I mean, if you look at a Mercator map, and you look at it and you go, hey, what's interesting about this map is that all the pointy ends of all these continents, like South America or Italy or Norway or in parts of Africa, all the pointy ends point down, which is interesting. You're thinking, what are you talking about? I go, really, take a Mercator map, flip it upside down, and look how weird it looks that all of the pointy ends are now pointing up. It's more obvious that if you turn it upside down. And you're thinking, what's your point? No play on words there. And I say, the point is that on a flat map, they don't point down, they point out. Because in a sort of map like that, if the continents are spread out, how this place is designed, that it's much more elegant solution. The UN flag is a very elegant map if it's taken literally. But the Mercator map, is not. It's like nothing. What I'm getting is nothing points to the north. Everything points to the south, almost like they're giving us directions in a way. And somebody mentioned that to me in an email. I didn't find it myself. I was going, wow. I didn't notice it. Did not notice it. Why would I? You look at a map and you don't think anything of it.
Yeah, which is why I think your show is so very interesting, is because you have so much participation from so many people from around the world, and they're able to point out these little idiosyncrasies and discrepancies that otherwise might be missed. But let me ask you about this. You can talk about it when we return. Yeah. But the Buddhist map that was published in the Hawaii newspaper, the 100-year-old map.
Got it.
When we get back. All right, we'll be right back, everyone, for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. Mark, if you'll comment on, and if you would share the story of the discovery of that map that I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, the 1,000-year-old Buddhist map.
Right.
I believe Chris and Cherie Geo were the first ones to make the video on that. And
Right.
I was so happy. It made me smile so much when they released that video, because again, it was this new little wrinkle, and I know it didn't resonate with as many people as like the trees thing that recently swept through the community, but I loved it. I love the entire concept because I think it's a very realistic map because of a couple things it showed, which it didn't have to show, which you wouldn't know unless you were into flat Earth. One was the UN flag in the center, obviously, the continents are laid out, but then it's kind of got a double barrier to it. So you have the Antarctic coastline, which is represented by a circle, and then a second circle, which represents sort of possibly the thickness of what, how thick Antarctica is. And if you look at it and kind of judge, it's like, well, it looks like it's a couple thousand miles at least, which would also make sense because if you're flying your own propeller planes back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s and all the way into the 50s, how long would it take you with refueling stations to find the edge of this thing? Because, are you going to go out in one direction and just keep going? And how long would it take you to kind of figure out what's going on, the shape of where things were? So that was the first part that I really loved, the fact that the barriers seemed to be there, and, it seemed fairly accurate from at least the flat Earth standpoint. But the other thing I liked is that the continents that laid outside it. Now, Chris and Cherie called them islands, but I mean, they were as big as any continent we had. Some were, I think, bigger than Africa. And there were dozens of them outside of this place. And there was quite a distance between the outside of this place and the first continent you saw. I mean, it had to have been, it's, again, way more than a couple thousand miles. But what I thought was interesting was none of those continents were connected. They were all their own separate little entity, like a whole bunch of Australias, all doing their own thing, which, again, would make sense because you wouldn't want them. And the centerpiece, our map, the UN flag, is very unique in that there are land bridges to, the two biggest continents. You can literally walk from, Alaska all the way down to the southern part of South America if you wanted to. And consequently, you could go from the eastern part of Russia all the way down to the bottom of Africa if you wanted, via land bridges. But these other continents didn't have those. And I thought that was fascinating. It's like, well, yeah, all these civilizations are probably independent of each other and they have their own rules and they were allowed to develop independently. And I just love the whole potential protocol scenario of how it was laid out. And furthermore, I'll throw one more thing at you. I know I'm kind of dragging this out, which is that the possibility of all these continents having I had no doubt that they were all inhabited by someone. And, could they all be the advanced civilizations that have the ability to, interact with ours here inside the structure? Or are they the wardens? You don't know. I mean, again, the storyline just keep branching out and the mind reels, but I think it's way more palatable and easier to understand than numbers, light years. I'll end this little part with this, which is most people don't understand how ridiculously big the universe has to be for the heliocentric model to work. It's so big that the speed of light, the only way you can even understand it is in seconds. It's light travels supposedly at 186,000 miles a second, which is 720 million miles an hour. And you multiply that by a month, a year, multiple years. They're numbers that we cannot express in words. Not with any, not that people know. I mean, yeah, you could say like quadrillion, but what does that mean to anybody? They're ridiculous numbers. And so this is that map, the 1,000-year-old Buddhist map, puts everything way back into perspective and makes it so easy to understand. It's like, yeah, here's where we are. Here's where our neighbors are. Here's the fence. Deal with it. There you go.
Well, another thing that's really interesting about that, and I've been looking into this, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which talks about it's from the Puranas, and it talks about the cosmology from the ancient Hindus, and it also aligns with what we were talking about with this particular map, and talking about these, on this Earth plane, that there's these islands and this, just these, and even if they're not like physical, like what we see represented with the different continents of our physical Earth plane, because like there's the mythology of the Hyperboreans that lived in the North Pole, but that it could be like a whole different type of dimension, sort of like with the spectrum of light, that ultraviolet light and these other at the top end, that those rays are not visible to our physical eyes, but they do exist. And so are these islands and civilizations and dimensional time space that is like that, that is possibly at the upper ends of the spectrum that we're not able to see. But
sure, very possible. The whole harmonics frequencies thing, the seven layers of heaven. Right. Sure, why not? The analogy I try to give to people is, and what you brought up was excellent, and I probably should make more of a point of this in different things, which is, look, you don't know this right now, but right now there's music traveling through the air right now. Right around you. There's country music, there's classical music, there's pop music. You don't hear it because your ears, you don't have the machinery. You need a radio to bring in the frequency. No different than television stations. There are television stations being broadcast all around you. And television, it's a two-dimensional reality. So who's to say there aren't other, the double slit experiment, for me, proves a lot of this anyway. But who's to say there aren't other realities which just you're within them right now, interdimensional. You just don't have the tools to get to them. And we've been kind of touching this on movies over the last 40 years anyway. I think the most recent one was the George Clooney Tomorrowland, where there was a separate universe living on top, or the lesser one, which I still think is a fantastic movie. Tomorrowland wasn't that great, but the Midnight Special.
Oh, that was great.
I haven't seen that yet. I'll definitely have to check it out.
Check that out. Midnight Special. By the time you get to it, you totally, especially if you're into flat Earth, you totally understand what's going on there. But different frequencies, different potential realities, no question. And I know some people say, "Oh, you're getting too metaphysical," and it gets all weird at that. I was going, no, it doesn't, because you're giving up the universe, the sheer size for multiple layers of efficiency. Not to steal a line from Jodie Foster's movie Contact, but any sort of great movie. And I lost on so many nerds because the aliens didn't look right. It's like, what did you want them to look like? Excuse me. I get a drink of tea real quick.
Oh, you're good.
Okay, but the point was where aliens would function on multiple levels of efficiency. So, why waste? Because some people will come to me and they'll say, why isn't there space outside of here? And I say, well, there doesn't have to be space. Why? If you're faking space, then, if you're faking the inside of a planetarium, then why does there have to be real space? So if you're faking big, then there probably doesn't have to be big. If you're faking small, you go a different way. But that's why, it's like people have a hard time giving up, again, because of the years and years and years of conditioning. We want there to be space. That's what we're taught. It's like, oh yeah, it's big in space, and there's all sorts of fun things and aliens out there. You could do the same thing in a much more intimate fashion.
Right, absolutely. Well, let me ask you about, and Kathy, if you have a question, feel free to interject anytime. But as far as now, because since I have come to this understanding, and also in studying and learning from the Book of Enoch and talking about this enclosed world system, the way that it works, being able to decrypt the motions of the sun and the moon as laid out in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. But when I step outside now, I have a greater understanding of, what I believe to be the true nature of creation and the way that it works, and even where the Most High has his throne and heavenly temple established, because in this new book I show that right above Polaris, Polaris being the center of the sky dome, the vaulted dome of the earth, that is where the throne of the Most High God is located, is right beyond the stars, right beyond the clouds, right past what is the structure and the firmament. and going outside now and just watching the sun cross the skies and the clouds all, rolling from west to east, and the way that everything unfolds, sunrise, sunset, the cycles of the moon. I have such great appreciation for it. And, there's so many people that say, well, why does this even matter? And just understanding where we are in the creation and our relationship with the creator in the creation, I think that in and of itself is just so fantastical and so just mind-blowing knowledge. And why wouldn't you want such understanding? And so,
Yeah. And don't you think, by the way, judging what you just said there, when I watch, I hate to say this, it's going to sound a little weird, but you will understand. And that is when I watch time lapse things of the Polaris, and people have said, well, isn't it possible that those are angels, marching across the sky? And I'm going, you know what?
Yes.
Why not? Because
right.
I've seen military formations, and as far as precision goes, why wouldn't they be?
Right.
And all the stories behind that. Look at, I'll throw in one more at you if you're going to go on that road, which was the Book of Jasher, where I remembered something. Again, I didn't get, somebody pointed it out to me, where at the end, when Enoch is leaving the Book of Jasher, when he's leaving and he walks off the edge, walks to the end of the earth, and they follow him, and they get to a part, and I think it's the end of chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken, the very last verse of chapter 3 in Jasher, where they get to the point where he gets to a point all the people couldn't follow him because he goes into a land of ice and snow and more ice and more snow. They were redundant. And it's going, we all know about the Bible stories, canonized and not canonized. And most of the time they're talking about sand and deserts and palms and dates, and camels. It's really, really dry in most of the stories. How many stories do you hear where they're talking about ice and snow and more ice and more snow? And I'm thinking maybe there was a land bridge at that point, either off the bottom part of Africa or the bottom part of South America. I mean, the land bridge is almost still there down in South America, where, maybe he did walk to the edge. And he was telling him, it was like, you can't follow me. And they couldn't. Nobody did follow him in the end because, the climate got too hostile. But I love that story. I think it's a great one. I love the whole Enoch thing anyway. I get why it wasn't canonized, but I think it's fascinating. It's like it kind of blueprints, the upper section. And I think, had there been more on it, I think it would have given too much away. So maybe there's a reason why it wasn't canonized.
Well, I think that the people that were doing the canonization process, that they were more interested in hiding truth from us than in sharing it. But that's just my opinion. But I absolutely believe and have affirmed through my work and showing that the Book of Enoch is absolutely encoded with a lot of this information, and not just the first one, but also the second one. Though there are certain aspects which I think whoever translated and brought it to modern worldview, that they were trying to interpret some of the second book of Enoch in heliocentric perspective, because the first book of Enoch describes the motions of the sun and the moon and there being this 364-day solar year. And in the second book of Enoch, it talks about 365 days. And also, there's these heliocentric leanings. And whereas in my mind, Enoch would not have contradicted himself. He knows exactly what, because he describes it. And when you're able to apply his motions, as I did in my 9th book, to the azimuthal equidistant projection map as seen on the United Nations flag, that you're then able to understand the motions of the sun and the moon through these 6 gates of heaven. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it doesn't it sound, the more you look into it, doesn't it sound more and more mechanical? I mean, it's divine mechanics,
right?
But it seems like a giant, lack of a better word, I don't want to diminish the sheer magnitude and beauty of this thing, but it seems like a giant building, with and then people say, well, if whenever you say mechanically, you're downgrading. It's like, what? Everybody's got their tools. God's tools, I think, are way better than ours. And plus, I also think God is also a programmer. Why not? We use programming. Art imitates life, and life imitates life.
Right. And Kathy and some of my listeners just recently sent me an astro lab, the way that it works, where you're able to plot the movement of the zodiac, the sun and the moon, and the different so-called planets. I mean, and just with the way that all works, the way that they've mechanically put it together, it shows you the same thing as what Enoch talks about with these different levels, these concentric circles, and that's where all of these celestial luminaries have their movement and their circuit, that it's all within the firmament. And I mean, all of that, the way it works, affirms exactly what Enoch is talking about in his texts, which again shows to me that they are inspired. But yeah. Well, I because I know we're quickly running out of time, but I want to ask you, because you are on the forefront of study with all of this information, and so many people trust you with, sharing things that they may have learned. What has been of great interest? What have you learned, or what has really piqued your interest that some of your listeners or, other confidants have shared with you? What are some of the bigger revelations that you've released and shared on your shows within the...
There's so many little things. I mean, this thing is really evolved, and I hate to use the word evolution too much,
right?
But it really has evolved in that, like right off the bat, I had people. I mean, yeah, the clues I think touched on a lot of stuff, but I was encouraging people, like, look, do your own research, and I love that other people are kind of following some of my examples. I say, look, don't take my word for it. Don't believe me. I'm not going to convince you in an hour or two or even 5. I go, do your own research. And so, what was the first thing that people started doing? Almost immediately, they started doing tests on water. And it was, again, that was something I did not touch in the clues, which was there can't be a curvature on water. If it's true, then you should be able to see far, objects farther than normally you would. And that's exactly what started happening, where people were, the Chicago skyline test and the Hawaii test and the ship-to-ship test.
Right.
And that was the first big thing, because anyone can go anywhere and do these tests, where now I'm thinking of if I get a chance to work with some producers down the road, where we're going to sneak up on some scientists on this and say, okay, based on your curvature formulas, which is 8 inches per mile squared, if I look at this object, if I, and you can even have them pick the object. It's like, okay, I'm on this beach. There's an object 60 miles away. Should I be able to see it? And, fine, they're not really great on optics. But the first instinct, I think Rob Skiba touched on this, was no, you shouldn't be able to see it. Right. To date, and I'm going to go the other way with this now, because everyone knows you can see a ship, and then it goes over the horizon, and then you zoom in, and now you can see the ship again.
Right.
Find me an object anywhere. You want to make it easy. Forget about telling people about this and this. Find me an object that you can't see. So science should be able to go to the other side and say, okay, find me an object that is X miles away that I can't see, and no matter what I do, I still can't see it. You know what I mean? So if it's 100 miles away, I'm down at the beach, and you say you will never be able to see that object because of the curvature of the Earth. Right. And I say, all right, fine. And I grab a cool Pix 900, or I grab a telescope. And if I can't see, of course, you have to deal with weather conditions and all the other crap. But on a clear day, to date, as far as I know, no one has ever been able to find that object where it's like, oh, yeah. I mean, that for me, you want the curvature? Do you want to show me the globe? That's it. Right there. Find me an object that no matter what I do, I can't see. It has never, ever been done. And it won't. No, it never will be. I mean, heck, the Reunion Islands, what was it, 129 miles? And you can see them all. And I know people are still going to come back and call refraction and call this and call that. But the point is you can't find me an object that's forever gone. And and I know, does that prove that the Earth is perfectly flat? No, it doesn't. But there are other little things, like it's the little
proves there's no measurable curvature.
No. Here's one, for example, that I was talking with somebody the other day, where there was a study was done, 10 years ago at least now, where Kansas, in the United States,
right,
Kansas is literally flat as a pancake. Yeah, it's 0.9. I think a pancake is actually a bad reference. It is it is 99.97% flat. And he was going, well, so what, right? It's like, well, Kansas is not small. that is a big chunk of land. It's one of your bigger states, and you're telling me the whole thing is 99.99%, basically 100% flat. And now the argument will be, and that's way bigger than that salt flats that's down in where is that? Chile or Argentina? Chile. Yeah, it's way bigger than that. The salt flats was only like 100 by 100. Kansas is way bigger than that. And their argument is, well, that's just a flat piece of land sitting on top of a sphere. I was like, yeah, but statistically, I don't know if that. Can you really say that? Can you really say that? And that was just Kansas. Nebraska, it's got to be sort of the same way.
Right.
Wyoming to a certain extent, South Dakota, North Dakota. There's a lot of states out there. I've driven through a lot of these states. Yeah. There's some really flat land in the West. And is the only reason why you can't say it with some of the other states is because they've got these weird rolling hills. And, there's, when it comes down to it, when you find a flat piece of real estate, is it really, really flat? And most of the time it appears to be. Another one would be the, I know you got a few minutes left. Let me throw this one thing and then
you're good.
Which is the moonlight test. That was another one I didn't touch in the,
exactly.
In the clues where people, and I laughed at it. If you look back on the show, but I jumped on it, at first. And I remember Jonathan was like going, dude, you were, even on air, he was going, dude, you were way out there with this one. I was going, no, man, think about it. And I will take credit for this. I was the first one to suggest, I go, here's a weird test for you. I go, fine. If moonlight is cold, then if you take a magnifying glass to moonlight, does it get warmer or does it get colder? Because it can't get colder, can it? Because you're magnifying light. But if it's a cold light, like a cool laser, which we can duplicate now with technology, we couldn't have done this 30 years ago, from what I understand. Then how is that possible? And you're saying, does that prove a flat Earth? No, it doesn't prove a flat Earth. But it completely puts into question the relationship between the sun and the moon, which means that if the moon isn't reflecting anything off the sun, if it's generating its own light, then if people listening to it for the first time and don't understand, what I'm saying is it's the equivalent of bouncing a flashlight off a wall and chilling vegetables with it. It's not possible. It's not. Yeah.
Did you see the Discovery Channel with Stephen Hawking, that supposed proof that the Earth is curved?
The laser test with the helicopter?
Right. And Brian came out and showed they didn't show even that they'd leveled it. So it seems the only thing that they can do is to deceive. So that was deceptive.
You're absolutely right, Kathy. It was a joke, and they're doing everything they can.
Stephen Hawking, though.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, look at MythBusters. They came out and did a thing. Now they weren't doing an anti-flat Earth thing, and I'm sure flat Earth scares these guys to death. Where they came out and said, because people were saying the moon missions were fake, and I thought the moon missions were fake for 10 years, but I couldn't figure out why. That's, by the way, let me kind of wrap it up on this, and then we can do again whatever segues you want to, which is you have to let go of certain things in stages. You're not going to be able to let go of all this at once if you're hearing this for the first time, and that is the moon missions, the American space program has got to go, and that is it answered a big question for me that had been lingering around for 10 years, which was it's not that they wanted to fake the space program, they had to. Because if you don't fake the space program, sooner or later, a private sector, a General Dynamics, a Lockheed Martin, a Boeing, they're going to get involved and they are going to send the probes up themselves. So you have to go to the moon, and you've got to fake it, and you've got to make it seem boring, and there's nothing to see here, and we're not always ever going there ever again. The Russians quit and everybody quits and nobody goes to the moon. And then you're going to milk it for as long as you can. And that leads us to today, which is the space programs have been milking old pictures and old technology and not progressing any further. They talk about, oh yeah, we're going to Mars. Oh yeah, we're going to go to Mars. Really? You've been saying that for 15 years. Oh yeah, we're still going to go. No, you're not. You're not going. No one's going to Mars. You can't fake it. That's where they're trapped right now. I'll end on this note, which is you can't fake any more space programs, because the detection ability of the internet, by that I mean people like you and me and people that are listening to this right now, we have access to detection abilities through video, through audio, through pictures. We can analyze stuff and compare notes at far greater detail. So even if you wanted to fake the Mars program, you couldn't do it. There's not enough money in the world, not enough time.
Right, I agree with you. And now then, they're caught in between a rock and a hard place, because we're definitely calling people's attention to all of their fakery and their lies, and they just running with like a chicken with their head cut off now. But want to give you a chance again, Mark, and for the listening audience, Mark's going to come on with us again for another few. We're going to do a series, so that will be definitely at another point. But if you would, your website, contact information, where your shows are, where people can go to support you in your endeavors.
Sure, real quick. MarkSargent.com is the subscription website, and ClosedWorld.com is the free website. The book is called Flat Earth Clues, Sky's the Limit. There's an Audible version of that. There's some free apps out there on Android and iPhone for the Flat Earth Clues. I do a show on Truth Frequency Radio called Strange World, is on Tuesday nights currently. But really, if you want to find me, the easiest way is to type in Flat Earth Clues into any search engine, and you will find the path that leads to me. All my contact information is there, my email address, my phone numbers. There are actually real things, and you can write me and ask me questions. I get a lot of stuff, but I'll try to do what I can.
Real quick question: are you working on other Flat Earth Clues, and will there be another book?
There'll probably be another book in the future. As far as Flat Earth Clues, we'll see.